with members from NAVCOC, and we're going to start a discussion now. Sakina, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Leanne. And we are back here, and we are at the 54th conference of NAVCOC. And this organization, established in 1964, going on to give birth to some of the most preeminent black business people in South African society. Well, right now we're going to discuss a topic that seems to be a rather contentious one, because it depends on who you speak to say whether this is really the problem that small businesses face in the main, or whether there are other factors that contribute to small businesses not flourishing as they should. Well, we're talking access to finance, but not just finance, access to markets as well. Because I know, this is a well-known refrain that many business people will tell you that unless they can get access to sufficient finance to kickstart their businesses, that they are bound to fail. But that is not the only factor. So let me first start by introducing our panel here this morning. And to my extreme right is, of course, the president, the outgoing president of NAVCOC, I should say. And I'm going to ask him for his opening remarks with regard to the sentiment, and then I'll introduce the rest of the panel as we go along. But Mr. Lawrence Mavundla, we started a discussion earlier on. You spoke about the township economy per se, talking about how you as NAVCOC felt that government needed to provide more protection in this regard for township businesses. But as per introduction right now, maybe just in a minute or two, if you could just give us your sentiments with regard to access to finance.
Access to finance for small businesses is very important, because without access to finance, small businesses are subjected to go to financial institutions that demand a lot of information that they don't have, because they are mostly startups. And we are saying that government should really fund the institutions that it has created, such as NEF, such as CIFA, such as IDC, to make sure that they also relax the requirements so that small businesses can have access to finance. Because currently we've got a serious problem that NEF is underfunded, and it's supposed to look at black economic empowerment, and there is no direction when it's going to be funded. CIFA is underfunded, and it's supposed to look after small businesses, and it's also not accessible, and the requirements for small businesses to access funding are so stringent that it is almost impossible. They have to fill in almost 20 forms in order to access finance, and the information required small businesses really do not have.
Mr. Mavundla, you say that these institutions are underfunded. If NEF, I think, was funded to the tune of 6.4 billion, how much should they be funded to then?
If you are funding social welfare with 250 billion, and it means your focus is to make people dependent on government rather than to create jobs. If small businesses, in terms of the NDP, is supposed to create 90% of the jobs, then the largest funding should be going to small business, not the other way around.
Interesting sentiments there, Mr. Mavundla, and we'll engage on them a little more. But I want to move on and bring in some of the other panelists here. Dr. Osborne Mahanjana, who is, of course, the CEO of Sechaba Medical Solutions. And by way of introduction, just very briefly, Sechaba, who are you?
Thanks, Sakina. As you have said, my name is Dr. Osborne Mahanjana. I'm the CEO for Sechaba Medical Solutions. Sechaba administers Sizwe Medical Fund, which is one of the top 10 medical schemes in South Africa, open medical scheme. This year it has been celebrating 40 years of existence. It's a scheme that has beneficiaries over 115,000 and also has a premium income over 2 billion rands. But the issue that I wanted to talk about it today, I know Mr. Mavundla is talking the access to finance, but it's the issue sometimes of access to markets. Even if you look at medical schemes now, we say that we're among the top 10 medical schemes. But if you look at probably the top medical schemes, medical inflation this year is around about CPI plus 3%. It's been over that in the past few years. Sizwe Medical Fund increases for 2019 was 6.1%. And if you look at the competitors, they range from 8%, some as high as 14%. And also, it's not like that we offer only the cheap, affordable scheme, but also offer rich benefits. You will assume that in a logical situation that will be dominating the market. It's not that we've done this for this year, we've been doing it for a couple of years. But due to sometimes market dynamics and concentration of our markets, Sizwe is not as growing as fast as some of our competitors, because some of the barriers to entry is that individuals, they don't decide among themselves which medical schemes to join. It's usually the employer chooses for you, and sometimes being the administrator that is black-run and the scheme that is black-run, sometimes we face challenges of access to market and access to the members, because the employers is stopping people to have access to Sizwe, and especially good benefits and also value for money.
And we'll come back to talking about how exactly you think those barriers to access to the market can be improved upon, because you've been in existence for 40 years. A company like Discovery has been in existence for 26 years. They are approaching 2 million. In terms of membership, you have 115,000 members. And so we'll come back and unpack some of those dynamics. But to my left now, Dr. Tami Mazwai, who is, of course, advisor to the Minister of Small Business Development, Lindiwe Zulu. And you heard what the gentleman to my right had to say, Mr. Zulu. But from the ministerial perspective, people are complaining about access. Mr. Mavundla spoke about underfunding of small businesses in this country. What is your take?
Well, obviously, thanks very much for this opportunity. Obviously, Minister Zulu is facing a variety of problems or demands, I don't know how to put it, but she has got to deal with one of the most sensitive sectors in the economy. And the challenges on the growth of this sector are not necessarily finance. It's a variety of issues, because entrepreneurship is a multi-dimensional, is very multi-dimensional. But what is normally never mentioned is that when you are talking of growing small black businesses, whether in the townships or in other parts, rural areas and so on, what we always seem to lose sight of is that are the embedded players, the players who used to operate during the days of apartheid. Now, we are expecting this new black player to compete with those people. And those people have got deeper pockets, they've got more advanced technology, they've got a deeper knowledge of the markets, and they have got deeply ingrained networks that says that we are going to make sure that we control this part of the economy. So the challenge is much more bigger than we really are aware. And that is what Minister Zulu is confronted with. So the Department of Small Business Development has now obviously been interacting with other government departments, and also with the provincial level of governments, including the lower level of government, the municipality, as to how do we have a much more holistic approach into enterprise development than the current situation that we've had. So Minister Zulu is spearheading that effort. Now, regarding the whole issue of SIFA, I think there is a bit of relief there, because the EU has made some funds available to SIFA to lend out. Obviously, it's not enough, but it is going to assist SIFA a long way. But what we have got to deal with, let us deal with these 4 critical issues that I've mentioned: technology, knowledge, the embedded interest, because the apartheid economy persists to this present day. So that is what, so how do we really deal with that bigger issue? Because you can give this small business as much money as it wants, but if at all you still have the dominant players out there, even the World Bank, the OECD, and the African Development Bank have complained about the levels of concentration in our economy. By levels of concentration, it means that each sector has got 1 or 2 big players. And this 1 or 2 big players make entry impossible for the other smaller black players that must enter into the township. And the last point I have to make is that these embedded interests are now aggressively going to the townships. And if at all, we are not careful, that market, which should rightfully be going to the black small businesses, which should really be providing opportunities for the new entrants into the economy, we cannot allow that economy to really be taken over by the existing embedded players. So the challenge is much more broader than is the case.
And it's an interesting challenge because given that we do have a free market system in operation, how do you exactly stop that without being accused of trying to basically interfere in how the market works? But I'll come back to all of that. I want to get to our final panelist there on my extreme left, Mr. Lunga Sio, who's the CEO of Truden Telkom, which is a subsidiary of Telkom. Now, I tried to read up on this and the yellow pages kept coming up. So if you could just explain to us your business and exactly who you are, please.
Thanks, Sakina. Yellow Pages has been in existence for over 50 years. Everyone knows it as the book, and the book has actually been a business directory. So if you wanted a business, you'd actually pick up the book and find that business. So it's been a means of small businesses to actually advertise themselves, which is actually, it talks to access to markets. Now, Yellow Pages in recent years has gone digital as well, because most people don't usually access the book. They use their phones, they use online platforms. We created online platforms, which talks to the issue of technology, because within the actual online platform itself, it's an opportunity for small businesses to actually be listed on those platforms. One, they'll become part of a much bigger platform. They can have cheaper access to funding, cheaper access to trade finance, cheaper access to any kind of finance, and also get marketing services. So let's take a local electrician from Umlazi in the township. He just gone through college, wants to start his own business. He probably wants to market his services amongst the people in Umlazi. If he joins this online platform where there's probably 1 million people from Umlazi that are accessing this platform on a daily basis, when they do look for an electrician, they go online and find this guy. So you've actually created an opportunity for this guy to market himself. Once he starts marketing himself, he starts making money. Once he gets money, then he actually has a bigger business opportunity to go and find more finance, because now he's going to need to buy a bigger toolbox. He wants to buy a car. So now, because you're part of this platform, and we're a much bigger platform, we can actually, let's call it, access better deals from let's call it a West Bank as an example, to actually finance this guy to buy a vehicle at cheaper rates than they normally go if they're not part of the platform. We can partner with SIFA to actually fund this guy to buy more equipment that would actually allow him to take on bigger jobs and probably employ more people to actually help him to take more bigger jobs because it's part of the platform. We can actually do a deal with, let's call it a builder's warehouse, where they buy their materials. Because it's part of the platform, you can access bulk discounts, so which means you can procure goods cheaply. But also on the other side, government wants to procure from these same guys. If they come to the platform, because the guy is part of this online platform where he's trading and making money, is verified, is a proper business, government can actually go to the platform and say, we want a number of electricians when you pick up from your own platform, because we know they've been verified, they've been offering a service, they know what they're doing. Then they actually get access to government work. But also for corporates, because corporates, they have a 30% sort of procurement spend that they need to do with regards to enterprise development, and also black businesses that can actually come to the platform and access these guys as well from a verified platform. So, and you can go on and on and on. Because we're part of a bigger telecom group as well, we can offer better connectivity deals. So for instance, you can get your phone cheaply, your mobile data, mobile voice as well. We can give you access to ICT services, as an example. You want a small printer. So it's a whole lot.
So your problem is not access to finance?
It's actually access to markets, access to procurement, or let's call it better procurement deals as well.
But what are the problems? What are the bottlenecks for
The bottlenecks for us is to actually onboard these guys so they become part of the platform. That's the first part. Once they become part of the platform, you sort of familiarize them and help them with a whole lot of, let's call them, we give them the tools, access to all of these other deals that we have on the platform, so that they become much more sustainable. The problem that we find is that 71% of small businesses, they fail within the first 3 years. Let's call it the first 1,000 days. They never exist beyond that. So if you create an ecosystem where you actually make them sustainable beyond 8,000 days, then they become much better businesses.
So why aren't you able to create that ecosystem at the moment?
So we've already created the ecosystem. What we haven't been able to do because of historical where Yellow Pages has been trading, we haven't been able to get access to get some of the businesses in the townships and actually onboard them into our own platforms as well. Because one, they didn't know that the brand existed, and two, because they've always been, let's call it, outside of the mainstream economy. They thought you just have to do word of mouth to market your businesses, whereas we have a platform that we've created that you can onboard businesses and then they have access to sort of better products.
Your problem sounds very similar to yours,
Yes.
Dr. Mahanjana, because again, you have a problem in accessing these markets. But is there anything, and we don't want over-regulation from government, let's just be clear about that, but is there anything that government can do to actually assist in this regard?
Yes.
We've got to be careful in using the term over-regulation. There is nothing wrong with making regulations that are going to fast-track black business into the economy. We had a liberation struggle. That liberation struggle was evening the playing field. Now, if at all we're going to be keeping on saying that, let's not have regulations and so on, and let's keep the economy as open as it is, we are saying that let the current status quo be projected into the future. Let us look at the issue of Sizwe, for instance. When the Afrikaner empowerment started Sanlam, there was a deliberate effort to onboard Afrikaners onto the insurance system and so on. But now when you talk about a black medical aid, we don't see any deliberate effort by our government to make sure that it onboards blacks into Sizwe so that we also have a major fund and so on. So some of these things, stare us into the face. I don't know much about Discovery, but I know that Discovery was able to expand its client base because of the networks that it had with its sister banks, whether it was the network of banks that it was associated with, something that we don't have in the black society, but we have a government. So that government has got to be much more aggressive in making sure that black initiatives succeed.
But then one would expect the government to start with SOEs, for example, and say, this is where we actually have the power, and therefore we will then make those changes at that level. Why hasn't government done that, Dr. Mazwai?
Well, obviously, we all know that, Minister Pravin Gordhan has got this monumental task of getting the SOEs operate according to the mandate that they were given in the first place. And I believe that our campaign now should be to say, yes, we've got the SOEs. Why don't these SOEs play the same role that they played during the days of Afrikaner empowerment? And that's the challenge that really we should, that is the new terrain of struggle, because we have black economic empowerment, but this black empowerment is based off, let's see if they agree or they don't agree and so on.
Okay.
It needs to be much more aggressive.
We unfortunately have to go back to studio just as it's heating up, but we will come back, of course, here to NAFCOC in Durban and continue the discussion. We'll also touch on the land question, expropriation without compensation, and what NAFCOC, at least one of their affiliate, what their position is in this particular matter. But for now, it's back to the studio in Johannesburg. Leanne.